it causes me to want to pause for a moment and just consider how much of the time therapists of all fields of therapy, we work in a state of being triggered without pausing to listen inwardly and take care of ourselves. What's that doing to us? Our longevity in the work, our capacity to enjoy the work. Also, what's that doing to our depth capacity to really, really connect with our clients, to bring to them an open state of empathic listening that is the strongest facilitator of their flowering, of their release. So let's look at what can be done to bring us from that state of triggeredness to a new clarity. Before I do that, I want to offer some brief examples of how working with our own inner child can free us up to see things quite differently and to come back to our clients in a very renewed, refreshed manner. I remember, for instance, one of my clients had lived through a very frightening, very humiliating, I would say, experience of serial bullying in her workplace. It was so crushing for her, so debilitating, that she had to quit her work, and she was quite traumatized. She was unable to work for a long time. And as she was telling me her story of how badly she had been bullied by her employer, before I knew it, I began to be triggered into my own memory of having been bullied much younger than her when I was in school. So this is my inner child starting to awaken. And I wasn't noticing that inside me was a rising anger associated with the unbearable helplessness, okay, the immobility that fear can give you when you're outnumbered as a little kid. And pretty soon I started to not listen so much, but to start to expect from her. I was starting to want to guide her in a way, or convince her to do something around striking back, writing a letter, finding a lawyer, to be self-empowered. And I noticed that she was resisting that. She wasn't ready for that. And I noticed the friction between us, in a sense, the misalignment or misattunement, the loss of harmony. I then went home. I paid attention. I noticed that really what was happening for me was about me and not so much about my client. I gave myself a lot of validation for that reaction. I knew that my anger was mine. My client would become angry later, but she wasn't ready for that yet. First, she needed just to be held in an empathic surround, to be allowed to feel helpless, to be allowed to feel frightened, to be allowed to feel like somebody that doesn't really know what to do about her situation quite yet. She needed more time. I was able to very comfortably and pleasurably offer her that once I had taken care of my own triggering, my own counter-transference. I've sat with people who are very, very depressed about the work that they're doing. And on more than one occasion, I did notice that I was coming up with solutions and that my clients they didn't seem quite ready to listen to solutions yet. When I see that happening, when I see that kind of resistance, it's not just about my client. Sometimes it's also about something that I'm doing to create that resistance. I went home between sessions. I do a little bit of inner child work. In this case, not inner child, but inner adolescent. I recalled how helpless, how lost I felt, how ashamed I felt in my early 20s, how desperate I felt that I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And I was in a hurry. And that hurry came back into my body. and that hurry was mine and it was not appropriate for my client. Again, it really made a difference when I became aware that that part of the experience was mine and not my client's. And that's something that I've had to do a number of times. I've heard from so many therapists, what happens is, here's another example, when you're working with somebody that will tell you a story of great trauma, of great shock, whether it's something that happened last year as an adult or something that happened to them as children, abuse, neglect. Boy, do we get triggered as therapists. None of us are that thick-skinned. And the triggering is about, even if we don't have the same kind of trauma, but whatever is most similar, remember that implicit memory or body memory is state dependent. The story from our client brings up whatever is most similar in our own experience. And what can happen with a lot of therapists in that moment is that we become so overwhelmed, not by our client, but again, by ourselves, the pain that comes up, that we switch off, we dissociate, we become detached. Our clients feel that. They feel abandoned. Sometimes it goes badly and they don't come back. As a supervisor, I remember one time having to support a therapist that I was working with who had undergone some very traumatic experience. She had been jailed and very, very badly mistreated, and in a South American nation. And when her own clients, many, many years later, spoke to her about similar experiences, she found herself shutting down because her own pain hadn't been processed fully enough yet. And she would ask her clients to stop speaking, which was impossible for the client and therapist alliance to proceed from that moment. And to me, that's just a cautionary tale that the therapist needs as much support as the client does, and that we continually in the helping profession needing to check in with our inner child, inner adolescent, to make sure that that part of us is being listened to, that that part of us is being validated. Let's look at what we can do. I want to talk to you about 4 steps to clarity. The first step that we need to take is to differentiate the feelings that we have, the thoughts, the perceptions that we have in conversation with our client, differentiate what is from our own past and what is from the client's true present. Not everything that we feel will be about our client. Quite a bit of what we feel is about ourselves. The moment that we disentangle that way, it's like opening a window and fresh air comes in. You become very, very liberated to see things anew. However, what is most important then, step number 2, is to make sure that you validate the feelings that are coming up for you, because often you will be thinking, I shouldn't feel this way. I shouldn't feel detached. I shouldn't feel pushy, or I shouldn't feel angry, or I shouldn't feel afraid of what my client is telling me. Should. That self-admonishment is exactly what prevents us from really releasing, feeling healed, and moving to a new moment. So self-compassion. Once you take ownership of what comes up for you, self-compassion is utterly essential in understanding. And you do have self-compassion when you understand the story, your inner child story, what you experienced as a child, what you experienced as an adolescent, also later. When you recall why sometimes you are reminded, your body memory brings back an old pain or a hurt. When you recall why you felt that in the first place, it brings this state of, well, no wonder I feel that way. That's compassion. Compassion is, no wonder I feel that way. We can't move forward without it. Step 3, there might be a need to self-care. If you're feeling really overwhelmed with your own pain memory, you might need to give something to yourself for that. You might need to see your own supervisor, your own counselor, have a hug with a friend, take yourself on a walk, have a massage, go for a jog, walk in a forest. Your body will tell you what it is that you need. But sometimes there is an action required, or a practice, a meditation, a yoga, to feed the inner child, or that part of you which has a memory, even if not from childhood, but a memory of wounding, emotional wounding. Feed that place in yourself. Your heart will open again and changes your perception. And step 4 is that you will find, if you honor, validate, and feed the need inside yourself, the emotional need, validate the wounding, feed that need, automatically it starts to change the way that you perceive. It dissolves projections. You will see your clients quite differently. And lastly, I want to leave you with a simple process that you can do between sessions of working with your clients. This is a self-reflective process. When you've been triggered, some big emotions come up from your past. Think of a recent experience of when you felt really triggered by the story that one of your clients was telling you, the behavior of one of your clients, and that you noticed that you felt overwhelmed with your own emotion and that was getting in the way. Think of one of those times, and I want you to take a pause and just notice, what am I feeling right now when I remember that? Name that feeling. It could be terror. It could be frustration, irritation, grief, hurt. Name that feeling. Notice also the thoughts that accompany that feeling, the voices that you hear in your head. When you put all of that together and recognize that that is a body memory, ask yourself this: who is my client reminding me of? Or what is the past situation that my client is reminding me of? Take some time. Give yourself time to reconnect. This is about you, not about your client. Now here's the most important part, because I don't want you just to feel your own wounding, but to notice the need that was underneath that. So when you were in the original wounding experience, what did you need? What should have happened differently for you? That's most important. What is it that would have helped you to feel better? Did you need to say something that you weren't allowed to say, or do something that you weren't allowed to do to escape a situation? Perhaps did you need help, support, affection, or simply playfulness and companionship from another person? What was your need at the time of the wounding? Name that need. The best part is, think of a way that you might give yourself that need, to have that need met in an adult appropriate way in your current life situation. How can you have more support? How can you give yourself more freedom to express what you weren't able to express in the original wounding situation? How can you say no in a way that you weren't able to as a child, perhaps? Whatever it was missing, see if you can give that to yourself now. At least the commitment to giving that to yourself. The implication that you deserve to have that need met. That's what's all important. That is validation. Give yourself that validation. And notice what happens around your heart. When you've done that, gently come back to thinking about the client that first triggered you. And just pay attention. Notice what new insights might you have gained about your client now that you have cleansed the screen through which you look at your client. Could it be you've learned something new about what your client needs from you? So this is what I call the inner child journey. Even though it doesn't always take you back to childhood or adolescence, sometimes it takes you back to wounding situations that happened well into your adulthood. But this is just my name for the process, the inner child journey. The good thing is that your clients prompt you to grow, to embark and commit to your own healing journey. And this is just one of the many useful processes that you can use. But also, I encourage you, if you like, to keep a record of these 5 steps in the inner child journey. You can use that as one of your tools of therapeutic intervention. It's good for you, it's good for your clients to help them know what to do when they feel triggered by people in their lives. All of us, all of our relationships, we all trigger one another. You can follow this up with my book, Inner Child Journeys, which explains this in great depth. But what I have most excitement about telling you is that through EDiversity in Hong Kong, we will be making available online a practitioner's training for how to use the inner child journeys. So this will be an in-depth training for health practitioners, health professionals. If you're interested, and I'd love to see you there, you'd be so welcome. I would also encourage you to attend the 4th presentation in this series, in which we'll be taking a very detailed look at what developmental science and developmental neuroscience has taught us about our essential core emotional needs that we had through the 7 stages of childhood, from inside the womb all the way through to the end of adolescence. The very different needs that we had at each of those stages, how those needs affect the way that we see each other, the way that we behave, the way that we react to stress. And that helps us to understand our wounding, helps us to understand what we can give to ourselves in order to grow and heal, and helps us to understand our clients much better too. I hope this has been of great use to you. Thank you for your attention.